have, and you know you have to hang on to it for as long as you like, because everything else is pretty crappy.
And this is not lies. Stephen Rochford has never spoken to Jimmy McGuinness in his life.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. You can text us on 53106. We're streaming the conversation as well, so as well as listening on News Talk, you can watch us on the Off the Ball social channels for Periscope on Twitter, at Off the Ball on YouTube and on Facebook, and also on the OTB Sports app. This is the Saturday panel. In 2001, there was a real novelty in the GAA All-Ireland Senior Football Championship, as it was the first year of a second chance, the qualifiers, after over 100 years. So Kerry and Dublin met in the quarterfinals in Thurles. Bank holiday weekend in August, there was a match which was drawn, and then Kerry won the replay. Tomorrow the counties meet again at Semple Stadium, because Dublin have to play that match there in the league because of what happened at Innish Falls. A lot has gone under the bridge in 2 decades. So to look back and to preview tomorrow's game in the league between these two great counties in Gaelic football, we're delighted to be joined by Dublin's All-Ireland winning defender Paul Curran, the Kerry's All-Ireland winning forward Mike Frank Russell, and the GAA correspondent of the Irish Independent Colm Keys. And Paul, just to start with you, the landscape in 2001, you'd have grown up watching the Dubs in Kerry, but you'd never met them before in the championship.
No, I was coming to the end, John, in 2001. I'd played 12 seasons and never came across Kerry in the championship, so it was certainly a novel game. And you know, Kerry were the All-Ireland champions at that time, had won another one in '97, so they were a very experienced team. And the fact that it was brought to Thurles, added to the occasion. We had the mayhem the first day with so many Dubs not getting there till late, and then obviously the way the game went, Kerry in command for lots of it, and then we nearly stole it at the death. So you know, great occasion, one that, you know, I suppose the Kerry boys remember more fondly than us, but still it didn't take away from the 2 occasions.
Mike Frank, I suppose when you're thinking about back then, it was Kildare, it was Cork, it was Galway who were on your radar, not Dublin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my own career, I think I only played Dublin 2 or 3 times in the championship, but obviously that's all changed now. They're meeting on a regular basis. 2001 was my first time meeting them in the championship as well. We had a few great battles with Galway the year before, but I think the fact it was in Thurles still, it was a novelty. If I recall, the first game was put back a half an hour because the crowd's coming in from both sides. But and hard to believe it's 20 years. But great occasion and something great to look back on. But then we had the replay there again as well, of course. But fantastic occasion. It's great now to look back on it. But at the time, it was novel because it was our first as a team ourselves meeting Dublin, and as Paul said there, coming across each other. But it's happening on a regular basis now, though.
Sure, Mike and Paul, you can still do a job in the club game, absolutely no problem, even 20 years on. Colm, this was completely novel, over 100 years of GAA, and we have these qualifiers in 2001.
Yeah, I suppose there had been moves towards it, John, and I say hello to Paul and Mike as well while I'm there.
Hey, Colm.
Yeah, there had been moves a couple of years beforehand. There were football review committees, and they came up with a very, very radical proposal, I think around 1999, which was rejected. But then another committee looked at it and conceived the idea of qualifiers. And to be honest, my recollection of them were there was a lot of opposition to them. And really, it probably didn't take off until this game, by my recall. It didn't really light up. There was one game between Westmeath and Mayo, I think, down in Roscommon, a half-built Roscommon at the time. Hyde Park was under reconstruction, and that lifted it a bit. And then came the draw, and the draw was a bit of a damp squib for those All-Ireland quarterfinals. They were the first All-Ireland quarterfinals, of course, but they were a bit of a damp squib because they put there were 3 provincial championship repeats. Tyrone had beaten Derry earlier in the Ulster Championship. Roscommon had shocked Galway in the Connacht Championship, and Meath had just about beaten Westmeath, and they were all drawn together. But the outlier here was Dublin and Kerry, because they hadn't met for 16 years. After meeting so often between 1975 and 1985, they didn't meet for 16 years, which was most unusual in the storied history of Dublin-Kerry. Obviously, through the 60s they wouldn't have met so much. In the 50s they did, and in the 70s and into the 80s they did, but nothing for 16 years, because obviously Dublin had Meath on their doorstep, a very dominant Meath for the best part of a decade and a half in Leinster, and Cork had really become strong opponents. They obviously won 3 after 86 and won 4 more then at the beginning of the 90s. So there was a lot of dominance there from Meath and Cork. So really, Kerry had only kicked on when Paddy O'Shea came back in as manager in 1996, and they won a Munster title and followed up with an All-Ireland. They had become dominant. But after 1995, Dublin didn't so much fall off a cliff, but they certainly struggled in the years after that to repeat that. And obviously the team changed. And really there was almost a tragic element about Dublin, because they conceded the 2 goals against Kildare before that in the Leinster final in 2000, and then they arrived in Thurles. And really, I don't think anyone expected Dublin to put up a very, very strong challenge against the All-Ireland champions. And as it happens, they did, and it made for a great occasion, and it really electrified the qualifiers.
So, Paul, orange trains, Nokia phones, no Twitter, no smartphones, maybe issues with Google Maps and the journey. What was the journey like down to Thurles? What was the whole day and the experience like, even getting there in the first place?
Yeah, well, we stayed in the Horse and Jockey the night before, and we came in through Thurles from the Horse and Jockey. And I mean, it was most normal morning, had breakfast, went out for a walk, no kicking or anything like that, then got on the bus. But I remember coming into Thurles, the square, and it's something I think that will stay with anyone who was on that bus that day. It was a throng of blue. There was a little bit of green and gold, but it was a throng of navy blue jerseys everywhere. And it's something that I think a lot of players still talk about, the support from Dublin that was down there on that first day. Now, it's no surprise that the game was delayed the first day, with so many of them enjoying the sunshine and enjoying a few other things as well. So, but it was an incredible support, and it was really normal match day. That's the way we treated it, but it kind of turned into a very enjoyable game for anyone who was there and anyone watching on television.
It was absolutely frenetic. It was like a hurling match, Mike, in the first half of the home of hurling. It was like a hurling game. It was completely mad and chaotic.
Yeah, and it was great to play in Thurles as well. Fantastic surface. We've seen all the great hurling games down through the years, but great to get in there and play a championship football game. I think we were 7 points up with 15 minutes to go on the first game, and all hell broke loose. Vinnie Murphy came into the fray, and Darren Holman himself got a goal, and it was, we were very lucky to get out of there. But going back to the supporters, what Paul was saying there, I was speaking to a friend of mine during the week who was at the game, and he was saying it was crazy from a lot of, like, Kerry people, first time going up to a championship game, probably with such a big crowd as well. So it was fairly heavy coming from the other side as well. But there were stories of cars being abandoned and having to walk 5 or 6 miles, and I suppose as a player you don't dwell too much on that when you're playing. It's afterwards you hear these stories. But we were damn glad to get out of Thurles anyway the first day, for sure. Yeah.
What was going on in the match, Paul, at half-time, for example? You missed a couple of chances. Desi Farrell and Coddy Morton missed goal chances. You were 8 points down at one stage. Was the dressing room raucous? What was going on in terms of what was on the pitch? Because it was just complete pandemonium on the pitch. Was there anything going on like at half-time that would reflect that?
Not really. I can't remember too much about what went on at half-time in any dressing room that I ever, was in during the match. There's so much happening, but we would have been very disappointed with that first half performance. I think we only managed 3 points in that first half, and started the game very well, played with a bit of a breeze, and I think we had the opening 3 shots, poor wides, and then Kerry took over after that. The game essentially looked over at half-time, and that trend continued in the second half. I think Kerry kicked the first point after the break as well, but I think it was 8 or 9 minutes to go. We were 8 points down, as far as I can remember. And I had a brother back from America. He was working over there for 10 years. Just decided to come back, made his way to Thurles, and he was in amongst the Kerry support. And he got sick of listening to them. The stick he was getting, and he left when we were 8 points down with about 8 or 9 minutes left, thinking the game was over. Walked into Thurles, walked into the nearest pub, and there was a roar or something, and he went up, and we were a point up in the game. So it was one of those little stories in the game that, you know, people will remember. But it was remarkable. We played football for the last 10 minutes, and a goal is a huge score. We ended up getting 2 goals to lead by a point. Johnny Crowley had an unbelievable, easy chance then to equalise as we were ticking into injury time. And when he missed that, I think everybody probably thought that was it. We just needed to secure possession and play out the last couple of minutes. But unfortunately, Davy Byrne, our keeper at the time, pulled his kick out, went over the sideline, and as they say, the rest is history. Big Morris hit one of the scores of the championship. But going back to the 2 misses in the first half, I mean, our current manager, Desi, he won't thank me for saying it was probably the worst miss of all time in the history of the GA. I just looked at it again yesterday, and he was actually inside the small square, so about 3 or 4 yards out, and with an open goal, and hit the crossbar, which was extraordinary. And the one before that was just as bad. Again, Desi was involved in it. It was just a poor executed hand pass to Collie Morden's feet, and he couldn't get the connection, again with an open goal glaring. So Kerry did offer chances, and you know, the last 2 goals that we got were probably typical of what went on again in the second game as well. We got plenty of chances, but unfortunately we just didn't take enough of them.
Colm, this was the day. Sorry, go on, Mike.
Yeah.
Go on, Mike.
But Paul, you made a good point there. Even in the first half, you were creating a lot of chances. As you said, you didn't take them, but you were very fit the same day. I thought you were creating chances the whole time. So as you got your reward at the end of the game when they got the 2 goals. So even though their score, we were ahead, we were probably taking our chances we got, but you definitely were staying in the game, creating chances anyway. That's from what I can remember.
Yeah, I think the Kerry scores came easier than the Dublin scores. I mean, you know, every time they attacked, they looked very dangerous. Opened us up on a couple of occasions. Their scores were from basically class forwards, and our forward line just didn't function. Not just on that day, but both days. So, you know, we probably got what we deserved in the end.
Colm, and this is the day Tommy Carr lost the rag with Mick Curley, the referee, who was a Garda superintendent.
Yeah, I think probably Tommy has apologised. He certainly apologised since for his interference or whatever he said to Maurice Fitzgerald after that. But yeah, Mick Curley had been in a few scrapes. I recall one with Larry Tompkins the previous year. And I think, if I'm right in saying, Tommy spent the replay in the stands after that. But obviously, he was close at hand when Maurice Fitzgerald delivered that most wonderful sideline kick that headed out somewhere towards Dovey and Templemore, and then turned back in and over the bar. But all of that, even Tommy and his confrontation with Mick Curley that day, contributed to one of the great atmospheres in Thurles or at any game really away from Croke Park. And it's ironic that for all the hurling matches that I've been at Thurles and all the great Munster Championship games I've been at, 2 stand out, and that's one, and the other is obviously Clare and Offaly, and neither were a Munster Hurling Championship match, where obviously these are, you know, they adorn Thurles, these Munster Championship games, right through the decades. But these 2 were just exceptional, and obviously Dublin making their way away from Croke Park, it was a real throwback, and even Tommy's confrontation, it all contributed, just the way the whole game fell. And my recall of those 2 misses were Desi Farrell had his hands in his head for both, and I suppose, as I mentioned earlier, there had been an almost tragic element about Dublin in the way they had lost games in the few years beforehand. If you even go back to 1997 when Meath knocked them out, Paul Beelan missed a penalty at the end of that game, and they looked like winning that game too, and he crashed it off the crossbar. And in 1999 then Meath beat them again, and Ollie Murphy ran riot, and they just couldn't hold them, and Kildare got the 2 goals. So here it was again, a Dublin team dominating with possession and just not able to put it away. And that Colin Moran goal chance, that came from a run from deep inside his own half. And Mike Frank mentioned it at the very, very start. Dublin were so athletic and so strong and physically powerful at home, and Kieran Whelan had really filled out by that stage as a footballer, and he was really physically dominant in those years, to the point where I thought, my recall of it is, Dublin were really on top through their midfield, and they just could not put those chances away. It was a calamity of errors, and it was almost symptomatic of them at the time. They could dominate games so much, but they just couldn't push them over the line. That was the tale of woe post 1995.
Yeah, like it's an alternative universe with Dublin heartbreak, isn't it? The way we're speaking 20 years later. Mike Frank, was there any doubt when you saw Maurice Fitzgerald get the ball in his hands? It was his first kick of the game.
Yeah, look, everything's been talked how good a footballer he is, and yeah, he was the right man to take the shot. And he backed himself. I don't think he was on the field that long, but I suppose the more you look back at it now, the better the score gets. But yeah, we were very thankful for him to save our bacon the same day and get out of there. But yeah, absolutely, probably one of the scores of the decade or century, whatever you want to call it. But fantastic look back, but we felt we probably shouldn't have been in that position, but we were where we were. We had won the All-Ireland in 2000, and 2001 we were it obviously took a lot out of us. We were not finishing out games, and we trained particularly hard between the Munster final and the Dublin game, and maybe it was the wrong thing. Maybe we should have been easing off, and it caught up with us against Meath in the semi-final after we were well beaten. So yeah, it was great to beat Dublin the replay, but it finished in a poor year for us in the end in the semi-final.
It was Johnny Crowley that did the damage in that replay, Paul, wasn't it?
Yeah. Johnny was on fire that year. Great inside forward. Really had everything. I mean, the game was completely different back then. I watched the two games over the last couple of days, and the most extraordinary change is that every kick out went long. I think in the two games there was two short kickouts. Davy Byrne kicked both of them. So basically, it was a contest between 1v1 all over the park. And Johnny was a powerful inside man who was able to win his own ball, and he suited that particular game. And his two goals in the second match really put them in a very strong position, and we never got back, really. I mean, we got a little bit of a lifeline early in the second half when Tomas was sent off, but Kerry were still able to get the chip over the scores that kept the distance. I mean, we scored two late scores, 2 points to get it to 3, but we were never in a position to win that second game.
Did Bertie Ahern come into the dressing room? I think I read that somewhere, Paul.
Yeah, I to be honest, he might have. I don't remember. If he came in for after the second match, I won't remember, because we all had our heads down and we were very disappointed. He may well have come in, but I don't remember that.
It is an advertisement, though, isn't it? When we reimagine the championship, Paul, like Dublin wouldn't mind going on the road if you had a league championship in the summer in the next few years. Going to places like Killarney, Porky Creeve in '83 was a massive thing. We could do it with a lot more of this, and for all counties.
Yeah, well, when I started playing for Dublin in 1989, we were on the road all the time before a Leinster final. If we were lucky enough to get to a Leinster final, my debut was in Newbridge against Kildare, and the following game, semi-final, was back in Newbridge against Wicklow. We played Wexford in Wexford Park. We played in Tullamore. So, you know, they were all great occasions, not just for the players, but for also supporters. I mean, Dublin don't mind going on the road. I mean, they actually enjoy it. I mean, if you talk to any of the supporters, they want that. So, you know, I would like to see more of that. The present team just doesn't play on the road, really. Now, that has changed a little bit with the Super 8s. But now that we're back, you know, in this particular time with knockout football, all their games will more than likely be in Croke Park again. So, look, it's not an issue from Dublin's point of view. They'll play wherever. As I said, my team and the team before that particular team played all their games except for finals and All-Ireland semi-finals in Croke Park. So, you know, not a big issue.
Was it one of the best atmospheres you ever played in, Mike?
It was, for sure, yeah, absolutely. Full house there. I played in Croke Park as well, but it was probably more enclosed. Fantastic, yeah. I suppose I have to mention our late manager, Paddy O'Shea.
Yeah.
Very animated man, the sideline the 2 days. You spoke about having run in with the referee, with Tommy Carr, but Paddy was well able to give it as well. But Paddy was always mentioned the dubs when he was playing himself, so he was up for the game. He was saying, right, we get the dubs out of Dublin, bring them down here and we'll be fine, but he wasn't saying it after the first game. So I think there was a story that we actually met in Borthill for food that morning. It's just outside Limerick, and there was a little field, so we had a few kicks around, and different times now to the preparation, obviously, what goes on now. And on the way home after the first game, Paddy was driving down to Borthill near Limerick, and he got pulled over for speeding. And I think the guard said to me, "You're after getting your second lucky break of the day." So he was a great character, but I'd just like to mention him there. You know, he's passed on and we all miss him, but fantastic atmosphere up there. Yeah, it was great to have played in Thurles, as I said already.
Yeah. Mike Frank, Paul Curran and Colm Keys back with more Kerry and Dublin talk, looking ahead to tomorrow after this.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
Your pet is your best pal, but who would look after them if anything happened to you? Join the DSPCA's Pet Guardian programme and enjoy peace of mind in knowing that we'll find a suitable home for your pet if you're no longer there to care for them. Find out more about the DSPCA's Pet Guardian programme or how to make your will for free at dspca.ie.
Today, we are all pioneers, standing at the cusp of a bold new frontier, the era of electrification. At Lexus, we know this landscape well. We were the first luxury brand to cease diesel production, offering instead an all-electrified range of self-charging hybrid and fully electric vehicles. We've helped more than 2 million drivers worldwide set off on their electric adventure. Isn't it time you started yours? Lexus. Experience amazing.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Auto Mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Auto Mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
Hi, I'm Niall Fitzharris of the Hazelhouse Cafe and Woodwork School. Yes, cafe and woodwork school. Like most business owners, I do lots of things at once. That's why I upgraded to Air Gigabit Fibre Broadband. Now I can offer click and collect, run our social media, video call and more. It's transformed my business. What could it do for yours?
For more about Air Gigabit Fibre Broadband, visit air.ie/business or call 1800 207 407. Air, let's make possible. Subject to availability. Offer applies to businesses with up to 9 employees.
At Online Tradesmen, we've never been busier. And if you're a trade professional, there's never been a better time to join us. Access over €17 million worth of jobs nationwide every month, along with e-learning and other supports. Need a website for your business? It's included in your membership. And on average, Online Tradesmen members get up to 10 times their fee back in new sales, marketing tools and savings. Apply today at onlinetradesmen.ie. Online Tradesmen, the home of qualified trade professionals.
News Talk already gives you your daily fix of news and entertainment. But wouldn't you like a little bit more? News Talk Extra is everything you might have missed, plus expert tips, podcasts and competitions, all straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at newstalk.com/extra.
When I grow up, I want to be a nurse.
I want to help people. I want to build a life for myself and my family.
And a future I don't have to worry about.
For almost 50 years, Cornmarket has supported public servants at every stage with all the financial products and advice you need, from health and car insurance to pension top-ups and more. Talk to us today at cornmarket.ie. Cornmarket, protecting the protectors. Cornmarket Group Financial Services Limited is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland, a member of the Irish Life Group Limited, which is part of the Great West Lifeco Group of companies.
Disney Plus is all new, all summer long, with the biggest must-see movies and TV series. From the studio that brought you Frozen, Raya and the Last Dragon.
My girl Raya and I are going to fix the world.
New and exclusive from Marvel Studios, Loki.
What did you expect?
And from Pixar, this summer's must-see new movie, Luca.
This is going to be the best summer ever.
All new, all summer, all for just €8.99 per month on Disney+. Subscription required, 18+, T's and C's apply.
Sinead, you look a bit stressed. Is everything okay?
No, I've shopping, prepping, cooking and all the ironing to get sorted for next week.
You're mad. Why don't you just use Gourmet Fuel? They've over 200 delicious calorie-controlled meals to choose from and deliver nationwide. You'll save time and feel great.
Take the hassle out of healthy eating and order today at gourmetfuel.com. Ironing not included.
At Centra, we have everything you need with great offers. Like Centra Fresh Irish part-bone chicken breasts, 610 gram, half price now €3.50. Hunky Dory sharing bags, 135 gram, only €2. And until Sunday, Budweiser 20 bottle box, only €17. Centra, live every day. Enjoy alcohol sensibly.
The seasonal event is now on at TJ O'Mahony. Shop the Webb 4-in-1 petrol multi-tool, a cost-effective tool to keep on top of garden tasks throughout the season. Pair it with the Webb self-propelled lawnmower, powered by a Briggs & Stratton engine, and the Karcher K4 compact pressure washer, and you can consider it job done. Visit us online at tjomahony.ie or at your local TJ O'Mahony store.
Listen to News Talk on Smart Speaker. Play News Talk.
Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Murphy. Officials fear there could be a wave of scams using data stolen in the HSE cyber attack. The government yesterday received a decryption key which could let it regain access to locked files. But hackers still have copies of the information and it's thought they could start releasing it online. Dr. Sean McSweeney, head of the Computer Science Department at Munster Technological University, says people should keep their guard up.
The way people could protect themselves against this is just a healthy level of scepticism in terms of whether they're being contacted by people who are quoting their own personal information. No government organisation would do that.
New research has found 2 doses of a COVID vaccine provide over 80% protection against the Indian variant. The study carried out by the UK government shows 1 dose offers 33% protection. 72 cases of the strain have been reported in Ireland so far. The Garda Commissioner says the murder detective Colm embodied the best of the police force. Gardaí today held their annual ceremony to remember the 89 officers who've died while on duty. Colm was shot in Castlereagh in Roscommon last June. Drew Harris says it's been an especially difficult year for his family.
And the events of that night demonstrate his determination in the exercise of his duty to protect the citizens of this society.
Humanitarian aid is beginning to enter Gaza following 11 days of violence. The ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants is holding so far. However, there's calls for longer-term peace talks after 250 people were killed in the conflict. Protests in solidarity with the Palestinian people will take place in Irish cities and towns this afternoon. And finally, pubs and restaurants can welcome more customers into their premises when they reopen next month. It's expected social distancing will be halved to 1 metre under new regulations. Donald O'Keefe is Chief Executive of the Licensed Vintners Association.
This greatly improves our commercial viability. It allows us to welcome more customers back when we can resume service. So now we're just awaiting formal publication of the guidelines to begin the task of planning for reopening outdoors on the 7th of June and indoors in July.
It's 2 minutes past 2.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to Ryanair, investing $20 billion in our environment with new, greener aircraft.
Scattered showers will extend to most of the country during the afternoon. Still some dry weather in parts and sunny spells. Highest temperatures 10 to 13 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. You can text us 53106, tweet us at Off the Ball. We're back with the Saturday panel, reflecting on two memorable matches Dublin and Kerry played in Thurles in 2001. Were you there? 53106. Give us your story ahead of the trip to Tip again for both counties in the league tomorrow. Joined by Dublin's All-Ireland winning defender Paul Curran, Kerry's All-Ireland winning forward Mike Frank Russell, and the GA correspondent from the Irish Independent, Colm Keys. Just to keep you up to date with scores elsewhere, Brentford 2, Bournemouth 1 now in that championship semi-final playoff. It's now Bournemouth leading on away goals 2-2 on aggregate at the moment. 66 minutes gone in the second half of that one. And also in the hurling league, Tipperary 2-7 now, Galway 6 points. That match threw in at Semple Stadium at 1:30. So Tipperary in the ascendancy in that one. You can listen on News Talk, also watch us on the social channels for Off the Ball at the moment, on Periscope, on Twitter, at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook, and on the OTB Sports app. Just before we went to the break, Mike Frank Russell, we were speaking about Paudie O'Shea. You were mentioning what a character he was and how great he was in the line. You kind of came into the Kerry setup when Kerry were once again resurgent under Paudie. You hadn't won an All-Ireland in 11 years. You won it then in 1997. Then he went to Westmeath and won the Leinster title in the first year, their first ever Leinster title. There was a documentary I remember called Marooned about that season with Paudie in Westmeath. What would the documentary have shown about Kerry and Paudie as a manager and as a character?
I'm so just glad there was no smartphones or iPhones around that time anyway, or Twitter, or Paudie wasn't really into that kind of stuff. But he was a great character. He loved football. He was a true Kerry man. He just bled the green and gold. He was our under-21 manager in 95, 96. So we won the under-21s in 96, and he'd previously had gone for the job apparently in 94, 95. I think Ogie Moran got the job. That's what we were hearing anyway. And so he got the job in 96, senior job, and as I said, we won the under-21s in 96, and he took over the senior team, and he just instilled a lot of belief in the team. It was a younger team. You had a few older players, I wouldn't say older players, but maybe late 20s. You had Morris Fitzgerald, Liam Flaherty, Eamon Breen, a few lads who were still playing, and he blended the younger lads with them. And they won the Munster Championship 96, which was great. I was still too young for it. I wasn't involved at that stage. I was still under 21, but getting over Cork, because Cork had the hoodoo over them for a couple of years. And then we went on, obviously, to win the All-Ireland 97. But to answer your question, Kerry wouldn't have won the All-Ireland without Paudie O'Shea coming in. I think he just instilled that belief and that determination, and it took off from there. And we won a second All-Ireland with him in 2000. And fantastic character, and served his county very well. We idolised him growing up, watching him playing. But as a manager, I think he earned his salt as well.
Paul, would you felt that Jim Gavin would have been management material, because he was on the bench in Thurles for those two games? He was still playing alongside you.
Yeah, well, you just never know what direction players take. I mean, a lot get into management, and some don't bother when they finish playing. But Jim was always a very serious individual in terms of doing the right thing all the time, preparing well. And he got involved with the under-21s at the time when he was still playing, and was part of the backroom team with Tommy Lyons when we won our first. I think it was in 2003, and then he won two more in his own right as manager before he made the step up to senior. So he put in the time, learned from mistakes. I actually was with him in 2008 on the under-21 management team, knockout competition. We were beaten by Kildare and Newbridge in the first round. But Jim learns and gets back stronger, and what he did at senior level was quite remarkable. And I think one of his great strengths was to be able to re-energize the team every year, even though they were winning things. He was always willing to throw in young players and break up a winning team and keep everything fresh. And I think that will be his legacy. I think that we're still going, with that kind of model where young lads are coming in. I mean, they played last week against Roscommon in the league with 3 or 4 new lads, and they just slipped in seamlessly. So that's a huge part of what Jim brought to the management.
Colm, 2 decades later, the game is obviously better. The players are fitter. The conditioning is much better. The skills are better. It's a faster game, but the rivalry is just as good and just as good. It was just as good as it was back then with Dublin and Kerry.
Well, you wonder what level the rivalry is, because really, when it has mattered most, Dublin have beaten Kerry nearly all the time. It's 5 championship wins now
and a draw,
in succession, and 1 draw, obviously 2019, and it's that last 12 minutes, just a remarkable sequence of play from Dublin to get the draw and almost win that replay 2 years ago. And obviously Kerry had a chance to shut the door there that day, obviously with an extra man, but didn't, and then Dublin held them at arm's length superbly in the replay. And obviously in league matches, it's been closer, and anytime Dublin have gone down to Kerry, whether it be Tralee on a Saturday night or Killarney on a Sunday afternoon, Kerry have been very competitive to the point where they've won twice. They've drawn down in Tralee. They've obviously drawn last year's league match in Croke Park. So from that point of view, in league games, I think there's only been once or twice: a league final in 2016 and a league match in Croke Park in 2018. Actually, it was David Clifford's first game against Dublin, when Dublin really got out ahead and dominated and ran up a big score against Kerry. But nearly all the time it's been close. So from that point of view, yes, it's a rivalry, and they're meeting a lot more now than they were. But Dublin still have the upper hand here, and I think it's something they'll probably be conscious of with this game in mind too, is that for any team, obviously they will see them as their biggest rivals and the team most likely to take them down in whether it's this year or in future years. So this is a game that obviously Dublin will target to deliver as big a performance as possible, really.
We saw Mike Frank in 2009, the startled earwigs game, and Dublin got taken to the cleaners by Kerry, but they won then the following year in the league. Do you think Kerry need to make a statement against Dublin, because it's a long time that Kerry have beaten Dublin well in a match?
I do. I think Kerry need to win tomorrow. I think they need to start beating this Dublin team, because I think Dublin referenced that game in 2010 in Killarney, that they put down a marker. They hadn't won in Killarney in 15 or 16 years in a league game. So, and they've always gone back and referenced that game. And I know the game is in Thurles tomorrow. It's not in Killarney or Parnell Park or Croke Park. But I think it's a bigger game for Kerry, in my opinion. I think they need to start just psychologically getting one over Dublin.
Were you encouraged by what you saw last weekend, Mike?
Absolutely. A surprise too with Galway. I thought Galway would be better, but we don't know where teams are with COVID and things like that, and what teams are trying to plan or looking down the line and things like that. But yeah, very impressive forwards, especially in the forwards. But going back to tomorrow, I think it's not going to decide the All-Ireland, no. If Kerry meet Dublin in the All-Ireland this year, both teams will feel they can win the game. But tomorrow, I think just for their own mindset and for the management as well, I think they need to get over the line somehow tomorrow.
Is David Clifford the best ever talent to come out of Kerry, Mike Frank, in your view?
He's if he keeps going the way he was last weekend, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we seem to be able to produce forwards, which is great, but he's playing fantastic football, and he has the tools to keep going and to be one of the all-time greats. I hate heaping pressure on young lads. The boy's still only 22, but he's certainly going in the right direction. I think one player that's overlooked a bit sometimes is Seanie O'Shea, the centre forward. He's an outrageous talent, I think, as well. He's going under the radar sometimes. He's supplying the bullets, but he's an outrageous talent, I think.
You play corner forward, Mike. For the person who is not in, you can watch on TV and all of that kind of from the stands, but when you actually know that position very well, what is it that David Clifford has that maybe sets him apart from other top corner forwards?
Well, at the moment, physically, for a young fella, he scored 4 goals in a minor final, which is nearly unheard of, but he was a man playing a minor. I think you'll all agree, the size of him for a minor, and he's just so physically strong. The closest I would like him to was Maurice Fitzgerald, but I think he was even actually more physically stronger than him. He's able to just get that yard of space He has it all at the moment, left leg, right leg, and he has a temperament. But his skill levels for in there for such a big man. He's so skillful, which sets him apart. I think for a big man, he's got so much skill.
Would you like to be marking him, Paul?
No, I didn't like playing cornerback, as people know. But look, David Clifford is. I mean, it seems like we're talking about him now for years, and he's still only 22 years of age. And look, there's one thing for sure. David Clifford will win All Irelands. There's no doubt about that. I've always said it over the last couple of years that the team most likely to stop this run is Kerry. I actually thought that it might happen last year, but Kerry lost their way against Cork. But I think the penny is actually dropping with Kerry now. I think they made serious mistakes last year, particularly in their tactics against Cork. I know it was a bad day, but they set up very defensively. I think they played two essentially wing backs as wing forwards in that game, and allowed a team, invited a team onto them. And the longer the game went, the more confidence Cork got. And in the end, it was a sucker punch of a goal that caught Kerry. Now, I don't think that's going to happen this year. I mean, you learn from your mistakes. I think last week's statement was very clear that they're coming out this year to play an offensive game, essentially. And I think that's one of the big mistakes that they've made over the last couple of years, that, they've really focused too much on their defensive stuff. And, the game is all about scoring, and they've two of the best forwards in the game at the moment, two young players. And I think, if they concentrate on getting the ball into them as often as possible, then I think teams will struggle like Galway did last week. And I know it's early in the season, but I definitely see a change in Kerry's mindset this year. And as Mike says, tomorrow's game, look, it's only a league game at the end of the day, but when you're a player and consistently you're being beaten by the same team, and it happened to us in the 90s, we were getting sucker punched by northern teams every year, and we were just sick to the back teeth of being beaten by similar teams every year. And when Tyrone came in '95, another northern team, and we decided, look, this can't continue. And I think Kerry are in the same position in relation to Dublin-Kerry games. And I can't wait for tomorrow's game. I think it's a very exciting game early in the season, and the fact that it's live on television as well is fantastic. So really looking forward to it, and I would expect Kerry to make a statement tomorrow.
53106. Hi, I was at both games. Fantastic memories. Morris Fitzgerald's score was top class. Didn't think that on the day, though. Great to hear Paul and Mike Frank again. Two top class players. Dennis, a dub in Wexford, up the Dubs. You can text us 53106. Thanks for that, Dennis. Yeah, Colm, it's a knockout championship, so there's not going to be a second chance at the championship. So that maybe increases the stakes to a degree tomorrow. If you're a Kerry person or a Kerry football fan, should you be excited now about this team?
Well, you should be excited about it in the era of David Clifford, for sure. I mean, if they cannot build a team around him and obviously Sean O'Shea, they won 5 All-Ireland minor titles in succession. Surely there is a team to emerge from that. Now, my own suspicion is that, maybe the sum of the parts isn't as great as what emerged from that in terms of 5 All-Ireland titles. But they have Clifford, and you mentioned them, obviously. Dublin have Con O'Callaghan, who I rate almost as his equal. He is his equal, obviously, and maybe a bit ahead of him even at the moment, given some of the goals that he has scored. But he's surrounded perhaps by a better framework, so that gives him a better platform to execute his skills. The two of them bring such an X factor to the game right now, and I think, if we're talking about teams in the millenniums or team of the centuries in time to come, I think these two will be in the conversation. That's where they're heading. Yes, Kerry should be excited about the team, but they really do need to follow on from that Galway performance. Any slip up in that regard would almost neutralise that, because Galway appeared to be so poor the last day defensively, didn't get it right, and Galway have conceded massive scores in Division 1 in their last 3 games, 9-59 in their 3 games. So it does raise huge question marks about their defence. So really a follow-on. A statement, yes, I think a statement is probably right to call it at this stage. They don't want to be going into a potential All-Ireland final if they do reach that far against Dublin. They don't want to be going in with any doubt that Dublin still have them in this chokehold in the games that really matter. And I think this game does matter, and I think all the league games matter because there are so few, as we have said, games this year. There are only a maximum or a minimum of 4 games for each team in the league and 1 in the championship. There isn't really a case to hold something back, even at this early stage of the season. I think both teams really, for competitiveness, have to be on the front foot tomorrow. And while it's less important for Dublin to win, I do think that given their record over Kerry and where they want to keep Kerry, that they will be really charging for this too.
Marcus Forrest has scored for Brentford. They now lead Bournemouth 3-1 on the day, 3-2 on aggregate now in that championship semi-final, the playoff semi-final. So they're on the verge of getting to the final. Brentford with about 9 minutes to go and Bournemouth down to 10 men. Tipperary leading Galway by 2-7 to 11 points in Allianz Hurling League Division 1 Group A. Paul Curran, this was embarrassing, this whole COVID breach. Has there been any aftershocks in Dublin after that episode?
No, I don't think so. I think it was completely unnecessary and embarrassing. To be honest with you, I was on record saying that it was hard to believe. But unfortunately that's typical of the GAA, I suppose, and this notion that you have to try and get one up on your neighbours before they get started. So it was embarrassing, there's no doubt about that, and totally unnecessary. I mean, why the likes of Brian Fenton would be out allowing himself to get into a situation like that, and clearly it was wrong. Our manager is suspended at the moment, so he's not going to be back until the championship, which adds its own difficulty. So I think Dublin, although they were very good last week in patches, I think they're probably a little bit vulnerable going into this game, and I think it's a great opportunity for Kerry to get any sort of a win. I mean, a statement is actually a win for Kerry tomorrow, whether it's a 1 point, 2 point, or 5 point win. A win is very important for this group of Kerry players. Both teams are on track to meet in an All-Ireland final this year. We thought that might be the case last year. It didn't happen. But I think Kerry have learned a lot from last season, and I expect them to be in the final. Whether Dublin are there or not is another thing. But certainly the COVID breach was unnecessary and a little bit embarrassing.
Paul, just no Paul Mannion, no Dermot Connolly, no Jack McCaffrey. Are there players of equal standing that are coming into this Dublin team? Now, we saw Cormac Costello, who's been sometimes a bit in and out, scoring 113 last weekend. Can they keep going to the well, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, well, the answer to that is no. They're not equal standing. I mean, we've lost some of the greatest players that played the game in the last couple of years. I mean, the 2 Brogans as well are gone. So the Dublin setup is changing all the time. Jack McCaffrey left last year and they still managed to win an All-Ireland. And they're not as good, but they understand what's expected. I think that's probably the easiest way of explaining it. These fellas are arriving in very fit. I remember Jim Gavin saying to me in his early tenure that I'm not there to get these fellas fit. They arrive in certain shape. None of them are carrying any weight. They're all ready to go, basically. And we saw it last week. 3 basically unknown players coming in and contributing to a win. So look, there are. I don't think we're as good as we were 3 or 4 years ago, but we're still good enough to win. If that makes sense.
Mike Frank, we will get into trouble if we don't talk about other counties that have the chances in the league and the championship, even if Kerry might not even be able to lift a league, but that's another question for another day. But do you see it as Dublin-Kerry, Mayo and any of the other counties that are impressing you at the moment? What's your view on the landscape going into football 2021 now?
Yeah, but just going back to Paul's point there about Dublin, sorry a minute. the boys that you see coming in, the new players, like you had Owen Murchan and all these, every year they seem to have added nearly a player or two, and you'll say, oh, they're not as good as the last lads like Jack McCaffrey, but they're still winning the All-Ireland. That's just, we're down here scratching our head. I see you have Tom Lahiff and Darragh Mullen coming into the team now again, and they haven't weakened it. So it just seems to be, the team keeps evolving, and it's so impressive. These unknown players put to the people around the country, but they're just fitting in seamlessly, so it's very impressive. And it doesn't seem to be stopping. It's the scary thing. But that's the thing.
Does it hurt you, Mike? Does it hurt you? Does it annoy you?
I'd say every county has obviously extended panels, and there's players in the background coming in through development squads, but they seem to be able to fit in seamlessly more to the Dublin senior team. But it's a credit of what they're doing. They're doing everything right. But I think Kerry and DC are catching up. But just two new players I just mentioned there as well coming into the Dublin team. So it'll be interesting to see how they keep going. But Kerry, the win over Galway, can we read too much into it, because we still don't know where Galway were. But so that's why, as we said, tomorrow's going to tell us a lot more about Kerry. But the teams competing, I suppose, for honours, Kerry and Dublin up there for sure. I would have said Galway until what happened last weekend, so I think they have problems there, defensively anyway. Tyrone, under new management, I know they were beaten last weekend, but their forwards, young McKenna, Colm McShane to come back, Dara Canavan, as good as forwards as you've seen any county. Donegal have the forwards, I think, McBrear, T. Murphy. So the teams I mentioned there, Kerry, Dublin, Donegal, Tyrone, Mayo. Hard to know where Mayo are this year. It's seemingly a lot of new players, new turnover. So we'll see how they go. But the top 3 or 4 I've mentioned there for sure, I think, anyway.
We wouldn't have expected Colm, Cavan and Tipperary to win provincial titles, and that's the beauty of the knockout. It was a great, from a storyline perspective, last year. Can you see any other counties adding themselves to the conversation as well as the ones we're talking about today, Kerry and Dublin?
Look, Mike Frank has mentioned Tyrone. I happen to think last year, John, that it was an indictment of all the rest that Dublin really eased their way to an All-Ireland title. Great team as they are, they weren't really challenged anywhere, and Leinster's a write-off a long time now, and this year presents the same opportunity for them to arrive in an All-Ireland semi-final, which they will, obviously. And their likely opponents are Mayo, unless Galway and Roscommon can get into the conversation. And you would expect, given their record and given the hold that they have over Mayo, that they will get themselves back into an All-Ireland final. So with the quality of forwards around last year, I'm talking about Kerry, Donegal, and obviously Tyrone lost to Donegal early on. I thought it was an indictment of everyone else that a greater challenge wasn't mounted by those, and that Cavan and Tipperary especially were able to pick off the form lines. In obviously Cork had beaten Kerry, and then Cavan were able to beat Donegal. I think there's more to both those teams. I think there'll be more to Tyrone. I know that Mickey Hart was very determined to stay on for one more year because he really believes in this squad. He really believes that there's a set of players there that can win an All-Ireland and can really compete and do that. And I think there is a structure there that can come in the Tyrone forward line. You know, there's a lot of doubt over Colm McShane as to whether he's going to get back to his 2019 form, where best to play Conor McKenna, who can be a huge asset. But I think it's going to take him a lot longer to bed down than maybe what we think after his return from AFL. But they do have other forwards that can come back. They have all their talented inside forwards that maybe drifted off in the Hart era to come back in. And if they can make something out of them, they're going to be really competitive. But can they beat Donegal? And again, the Donegal forward line has Oren McNeilis back, and Kieran Thompson is there. Oisin Gallen, who's a really talented player. If he gets going this year, watch out for him. Michael Murphy is obviously there. And Michael Langan. There's a list of really good kickers of the ball. There aren't too many teams that are better long-range kickers of the ball than Donegal collectively, but you expect more of them. And I even expect a little bit more of Mayo. And why they pressed Dublin hard for the first half last year, they never really kicked on, especially when they had the extra player for the first 10 minutes of the second half. That was disappointing from their point of view. And while you would think on paper, if that's the word, that their forwards aren't as good as the others we have mentioned, especially Kerry, they're still a very competitive team that has ambition, and they've a lot of confidence to be in there. So all told, I expect a much better challenge to Dublin this year. And, you know, is there question marks? Are there going to be question marks? At what stage is the hunger in question for Dublin? We saw Paul Mannion stepping away earlier this year. Has he had enough of the game? Has Jack McCaffrey, who stepped away last summer, has he had enough of the game? Have they won enough? Have they saved it? Do they want to go off and do other things? And are there other members of the Dublin squad there too? I think as long as Brian Fenton and Kieran Kilkenny and Conor Callaghan especially are there, Dublin are going to remain the team to beat and the team out in front.
Colm, sorry, just Galway there. What do you make of Galway? I think they have fierce talent. Now, they were well beaten last weekend, but is it obviously to get a proper system in there? Obviously, Pádraig Troy is going to be working on that, but I think they have forwards to lead.
I'd say, Mike, 2 years ago, they were among the hardest teams. 2-3 years ago, they were among the hardest teams to beat. They had built up a defensive shell there that was... And it didn't go down well with Galway people, and they wanted to play front foot football. They wanted to play attacking football. And when Pádraig Troy came in, he made it clear, this is the type of football we are going to play. And for 5 league games pre-COVID, they were a competitive side. Some of the games they were a little bit lucky, but they came back after COVID the last year, and they were been really, really poor. Now, albeit a cynical foul, there were one cynical foul from Owen McLaughlin on Sean Kelly at the end of the Connacht final away from probably winning that. If he got that shot away, they probably would have. They might have won that Connacht title and get into a semi-final. Then could have happened. Yeah, they have a lot of talented forwards. They have Shane Walsh and Damien Comer. Do they get the best out of them? They have an All-Ireland winning under-20 team from last year to build. I think they will be in time, but I think there's a softer side to them than maybe some of the others that they really have to develop that side of their game to be really competitive. They'll play nice football at times, but as we saw last Saturday, and we saw in the opening game against Mayo when after resumption, they can be really opened up and defensively naive, and that's a side of the game that I think they have to get right starting from tomorrow against Roscommon. And it's a game they really have to win.
Colm, the one team that hasn't been mentioned, and I think they'll get great confidence from looking at last year's championship is Armagh. You know, they watched Cavan win an Ulster Championship last year. Looking at them last week, they've a lot of very, very good young talent, fellas whose fathers played the game, who know the game, and they have a very good manager. And they could be the surprise. Now, maybe they're a year or two away, but I think looking at them the last couple of years, they certainly have the talent and the backroom team, if you like, that's pushing
Donaghy,
them. And Donaghy's up there as well. So I think that they will go into the championship as dark horses, and they'll go in with plenty of confidence. And looking at them last week, I don't think they'll fear anybody.
Yeah, it was a good win for them because Monaghan obviously have introduced a lot of younger players. Monaghan have 4 or 5 players that you'd be looking at in 5 years' time will make up a very decent forward line. But Armagh have the 2 O'Neills, and that's maybe who you're referencing, Oisín and Rian. And not only are they big men, but they're fantastic kickers of the ball as well. You know, scorers of long range points, huge asset. A little bit disappointed that Jamie Clark has not committed for them this year. You know, he brings something a little bit different, and while he can be put out of games, he's a great asset to have there. But they're, for sure, Paul, they're a very, very hard-working team that are clear about what their strengths are, but also what their weaknesses are. And I think the lift of beating Monaghan last weekend will put them into a strong position to at least take on Tyrone and Donegal in the knowledge that if they win one of those games, well, they're into a semi-final, and that's a big prize for them. They have Antrim in their quarter-final in Ulster. They'll feel, because they're avoiding Tyrone and Donegal,
Ulster final,
we're on the other side of they will really feel they have a chance of getting to the Ulster final here. So I think for sure they are a team to watch out for. They'll feel a real opportunity. They had that opportunity last year after beating Derry, but they were crushed by Donegal, and the psychological blow of that, you just don't know what that takes out of them. But they're on the right side of the draw. If there is a right side of the draw, and Cavan came through it last year to avoid Tyrone and Donegal and to make the most of that.
Okay, just let you know, Brentford have won that semi-final in the Championship, the playoff semi-final. They beaten Bournemouth 3-1, winning 3-2 on aggregate. So Brentford going to Wembley against either Swansea or Barnsley, with Swansea having the advantage in the second match. That kicks off at 6:30. They got a 1-0 lead. Conor Howard, of course, involved with the Swans. Tipperary 2 goals and 8. Galway 14 points at Semple Stadium in the Hurling League. A texting here on 53106, having witnessed 2 great sporting moments in my life. I was behind the post in Paris when Johnny hit the drop goal to beat France. Was standing directly behind Morris when he hit that point in Thurles as a dub. It was a bittersweet moment. My memory is it was very windy that day and he hit the ball well out of the centre of the field from the sideline and it floated over the bar in the wind, says Mike in Dunleary. And Mike Frank Russell, is there any kind of worry about the Kerry defence still, or do you think that Peter Keane has done a job of that now to make them teak tough All-Ireland contenders?
I think we seen something different last weekend. I think Peter, and we got sucker punched by Cork last year, but I think he was starting to put his system in place. Craig Morley picked up Damien Comer last weekend, and Brian O'Begley picked up Shane Walsh, and they kept him very quiet, so they're going to be in your full back line. But when Kerry lost possession last week in the forwards, they were getting back to the fin very quickly. So it's definitely something he's working on, and they'll need it, especially if they're going to meet Dublin down the road in Croke Park. But Peter Keane is definitely working on a system there, so we have to, because we've left ourselves open too much in the big games in the last few years that have counted. Speaking of Cork, maybe as well, Cork people mightn't like to hear this, but you're talking about contenders, but you never seem to be able to trust them. They came along and beat Kerry last year, and we know what Tipperary did to them after, so they'll be hugely disappointed with that. There's a big league game this weekend as well, Cork against Laois. I think that's a massive game this weekend, going forward for both teams, because they both lost the first day out. Kildare beat Cork, and Clare beat Laois. So speaking of just Cork, and we mentioned contenders, you don't know what you're going to get with them. Very hard to trust them, but have talent there as well, like we mentioned Galway. So, but yeah, look, these are all the permutations before the championship. So, looking forward to it. It's great to be back watching football again, and looking forward to the championship the next couple of weeks as well.
And Colm Keys, when I'm thinking about 01 and watching YouTube clips and all kind of the madness, I was there. I've got the ticket actually in my back pocket, if I can pull it out here and not take the headphones off. And I've got the ticket here from 2001 in Semple Stadium. I was reporting for 98 FM back at the time, Dublin-Kerry. Any chance we'll have fans, you think, Colm, at the All-Ireland finals in August? Because that's what we want. What we want when it's safe to be back in these stadiums and supporting our teams and our counties.
I'd be pretty certain, John, there will be crowds back for All-Ireland semi-finals, All-Ireland finals. I think as we go through August, we'll see more. When you see the 1 metre, the 2 metre distance this morning be reported on, it's coming back to a metre. That's really positive for crowds. I think when you see what's happening over in England, and you would chart us as being maybe a month behind it, there's certainly talk of pilots. Crowd being allowed in for Leinster semi-final in hurling, maybe Leinster final, and there's a couple of rugby internationals in the Aviva Stadium as well, with Japan, I think USA, for early July. I'd imagine that those 2 grounds are the 2 that they will use to measure things, to see how it's going. And I think by the time of the provincial finals at the end of the month, we will see crowds back. Already in the north, Ulster GAA have aligned with obviously sports up there. 500 allowed into games, certainly club games, and the decision early next week as to whether they will allow them in for league matches next week. And I think they should, because what's the point? I mean, if 500 are allowed in there to go and see a game, let them in. Just, the alignment between north and south, I don't think the GAA should get too caught up on it. If 500 can go in and are allowed by law to go into one part of the country, they should allow it. And I do think it will then fast track things to happen down here. Obviously, you want to do it in a safe manner, but if you look at the pace of vaccinations now, you think that in 2 months' time, when some of these provincial finals, when we're on the cusp of those, I do think we will see some crowds back at those. And for the bigger games, semi-finals and finals in Croke Park in August, I can see 10, 20, even up to 30,000. If that 1 metre allowance is in place by then for outdoor events, I do think we will see crowds back.
Paul Curran, we're desperate for a match day like Thurles in 01 with a team in stadium. It won't be that for a while yet, but even some fans in the ground, and the match day experience, the ball hopping, the chatting, the slagging.
Oh, absolutely, John. Yeah, I would agree with Colm. I think what we're seeing, you know, with our closest neighbours, you know, 8, 10, 12,000 people in the English soccer stadiums. And as you said, we're not too far behind them. I think with the vaccination programme moving on at a really fast pace as well, things are moving very quickly. And I like Colm would expect to see huge crowds back in. And, you know, that's what it's all about. You know, playing the game in front of nobody is nearly, I won't say irrelevant, but it feels it. It's just not the same atmosphere. It's not the same. You know, it's not the same for the players, but the supporters make it. And you know, the sooner the better we see them in. Obviously, you know, when it's safe to do so, it'll be great for not just the players but for the supporters themselves to get back supporting their teams. So I would expect to see decent crowds at semi-finals and final this year.
Are you going to win tomorrow, Paul, briefly?
I don't think so. I think even though all the pressure is on Kerry to win this one, I think it's one of those must-win games. I think they started the league with a statement of intent, and I expect them to follow up with a victory tomorrow. Whether it'll be, you know, a 1 point, 3 point, 5 point, I think is irrelevant. I think it needs a win for Kerry, and I expect them to go and do that tomorrow.
Mike Frankie going to do it tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we will. I think it's very important that we do, to be honest, and we get a performance, more importantly, against Dublin. But the thing with this Dublin team, they don't seem to take days off either. So that's why it's going to be a very close game tomorrow, because Dublin won't lie down too easily tomorrow. But I'm hoping Kerry will win. I expect them to win after last weekend, but it should make a great game and hopefully a good championship as well.
Okay, we've got to leave it there. Colm Keys, Mike Frank Russell and Paul Curran, thanks so much for your insight and your expertise on the Saturday panel, and enjoy the match tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, John. See you.
Thank you, lads. Thanks very much.
Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. We are back after this.
Off the Ball on News Talk.